The kingdom of Blackwater had once been a land of unparalleled beauty and prosperity, ruled by the wise and beloved King Thorne. His reign was marked by decades of peace. The fields yielded bountiful harvests, and the people of Blackwater lived in harmony. However, all this changed with a single fateful night. The skies darkened as an unnatural storm brewed over the kingdom. Lightning struck the towering spires of Castle Blackwater, and the winds howled with a voice that seemed almost sentient. On this cursed night, King Thorne was found dead in his chamber. His once strong heart mysteriously stopped. The cause of the death was unknown, and rumours of foul play spread like wildfire. The people mourned, but their sorrow was tainted by fear, for they knew that with the king's death, dark times awaited them. Without an heir to claim the throne, the kingdom was thrown into chaos. Power-hungry nobles vowed for control, and the land that King Thorne had nurtured began to wither. As the kingdom crumbled, a chilling whisper began to circulate through the shadows. The dead king was not at rest. Months passed since King Thorne's death, and Blackwater's decline grew more pronounced. The crops failed, and strange, unnatural occurrences plagued the land. Shadows moved of their own accord, and the once familiar forest had become treacherous, filled with unseen dangers. The common folk whispered of a curse, a blight brought upon the kingdom by the death of its rightful ruler. In the dead of night, some claimed to hear the king's voice carried on the wind. It was said to be a mournful wail, a cry of anger and despair. As these tales spread, a small group of loyalists, those who had served King Thorne faithfully, began to investigate the mysterious occurrences. They believed that the king's soul had not passed into the afterlife, but was trapped within the realm of the living, bound by some unfinished business. Among them, Sir Eric, the king's most trusted knight, had been away on a mission when the king died. He returned to a kingdom he barely recognised. Driven by loyalty and guilt, Sir Eric vowed to uncover the truth behind the king's death and the curse that had affected the land. He is joined by Lady Faith, a skilled healer with knowledge of ancient rituals, and a young scribe named Bruce, whose curiosity and sharp mind proved invaluable. Together, they delved into the forgotten corners of the castle, searching for clues. In the deepest vaults of the royal library, they uncovered ancient texts that spoke of the veil, the thin barrier between the world of the living and the dead. These texts hinted that a great wrong had been committed, one that can only be righted by confronting the spirits trapped within the veil. Armed with the knowledge from the ancient texts, Sir Eric, Lady Faith, and Bruce set out to find a way to cross the veil and speak with the spirit of the dead king. Their journey took them to the forgotten corners of the kingdom where the remnants of ancient magic still lingered. They sought the guidance of the last remaining seers, individuals who could commune with the spirits of the dead. The seers warned them of the dangers they would face, for the veil was not merely a passage but a labyrinth filled with vengeful spirits and forgotten horrors. To cross it, they would need a relic of great power, one that had been lost to time, the king's crown, a symbol of Thorne's reign that had been buried with him. The trio returned to Castle Blackwater, where they faced the daunting task of retrieving the crown from the king's tomb. The tomb was sealed with powerful wards designed to protect the king's body from desecration. As they breached the wards, a cold wind swept through the crypt, and the oppressive atmosphere made it clear that they were not alone. Spectral figures, remnants of long-dead warriors, rose from the shadows to defend their king even in death. With bravery and determination, the group fought their way to the king's sarcophagus. There, lying beside the body of King Thorne, was the crown. As Eric reached it, the spectral warriors paused, their hollow eyes fixed on the night. In a moment of clarity, Eric kneeled and swore an oath to restore the kingdom in Thorne's name. The spirits faded, and the crown was theirs. With the crown in hand, the trio prepared for the most dangerous part of their quest, crossing the veil to confront the spirit of King Thorne. In a secluded grove, under the light of a blood moon, Lady Faith performed the ancient rituals needed to pierce the veil. The air grew thick with an unnatural chill, and the world around them began to blur as the boundary between life and death weakened. As they crossed into the veil, the landscape changed. They found themselves in a twisted reflection of the kingdom, where the land was barren and the sky was a perpetual twilight. Shadows writhed at the edge of their vision, and the air was filled with the echoes of the past. In this ghostly realm, they finally encountered the spirit of King Thorne. But the king they found was not the wise and just ruler they remembered. Thorne's spirit was twisted with rage and sorrow, his form a wraith of his former self. He spoke of betrayal, of a dark force that had conspired against him and brought about his untimely death. His anger had bound him to the veil, unable to move until justice was served. Sir Eric pleaded with the king to reveal the identity of his betrayer, but Thorne's memories were fragmented, clouded by the anger that consumed him. The trio realized that to free the king, they would need to restore his memories and quell his wrath. Only then could the king's soul find peace and the curse on the kingdom be lifted. In the twisted realm of the veil, where the shadows stretched long and the air was thick with despair, Sir Eric, Lady Faith and Bruce began their daunting task to restore King Thorne's fragmented memories. The wraith-like king, a shadow of his former self, hovered before them, his eyes burning with an internal fire. His form flickered, the edges of his figure dissolving into the murky twilight of the veil. "Where do we start?" Bruce whispered, his voice barely audible against the wind that carried the whispers of the dead. "The seers spoke of memory shards," Lady Faith replied, her eyes scanning the barren landscape. "Fragments of the king's life scattered throughout the veil. If we gather them, we might restore his memories and uncover the truth." King Thorne's spirit drifted aimlessly, a prisoner of his own rage and sorrow. They knew they had to act quickly before the wraith consumed him entirely. With the king's crown glowing faintly in Sir Eric's hands, they ventured deeper into the veil, where the echoes of past events lingered like faded dreams. Their journey led them to the ruins of what was once Castle Blackwater, now a twisted reflection of the world they knew. The castle's walls were cracked and its towers crumbled. An image of King Thorne as a young man, his heart full of hope as he ascended to the throne. The shard glowed with a soft light, and as Sir Eric reached out to touch it, the memory surged into the king's mind. Thorne's spirit faltered, the image of his younger self momentarily clearing the fog of rage. But with the memory came pain, a deep, searing sorrow that had lain dormant for years. The trio watched as the king's form twisted, his anguish evident. His voice, when it came, was hoarse and filled with a suffering they could scarcely comprehend. "Betrayal," he whispered, his gaze distant. "I was betrayed by the one I trusted above all others." Before they could press him further, the memory faded, leaving behind only more questions. The king's spirit grew restless, the pain of recollection threatening to overwhelm him. "We must continue," Sir Eric urged. "The truth is within reach, and with it the power to save Blackwater." Their quest led them through treacherous landscapes, where each step brought them closer to the heart of the mystery. They gathered more memory shards, each one piece of the puzzle. They saw the king's joy at the birth of his daughter, his pride as he defended his kingdom from invaders, and his growing unease as dark omens began to cloud his reign. Yet the identity of the betrayer remained elusive, hidden behind a veil of pain and sorrow that the king could not penetrate. With each shard, Thorne's spirit grew stronger, but so did the darkness within him. The anger that had kept him bound to the veil simmered beneath the surface, threatening to erupt at any moment. They knew that time was running out, and that the final piece of the puzzle would be the most difficult to obtain. As they neared the end of their journey, the trio arrived at the deepest part of the vale, where the shadows were darkest and the air was thick with a stench of decay. Here the final memory shards awaited them, buried within the heart of a twisted, dead forest. The trees, blackened and lifeless, loomed over them like spectres, and the ground beneath their feet felt as though it was pulsing with a malignant energy. They found the shard embodied in the base of the largest tree, its light faint and flickering. As Lady Faith carefully extracted it, the entire forest seemed to shudder, as though awakening from a long sleep, the shard pulsing in her hands. And when she handed it to Sir Eric, the memory it contained flooded King Thorne's mind with a force that nearly brought the spirit to its knees. The memory was of the night of the king's death. King Thorne stood in his chamber, his heart heavy with the knowledge that something was terribly wrong. He sensed the presence of an intruder, but before he could react, a shadowy figure emerged from the darkness, striking with a dagger coated in a poison so potent it stopped his heart instantly. The betrayer stepped into the light, and the trio gasped in horror. It was none other than Sir Alistair, King Thorne's closest advisor and confidant, a man whom the king had trusted above all others. Alistair's eyes were cold and devoid of remorse as he watched the life drain from his king, his lips curling into a sinister smile. Betrayed by a friend, by a brother in arms, Thorne's spirit howled, his voice echoing through the void. The revelation was too much for the wraith to bear. His form began to convulse, the rage and sorrow within him threatening to consume him entirely. But as the memory faded, another figure emerged from the shadows of the forest, the spectral form of Sir Alistair himself. The traitor had been trapped in the vale, condemned to wander in torment for his betrayal. His presence was like a wound in the fabric of the veil, a festering sore that had poisoned the very essence of the realm. "Thorne!" Alistair hissed, his voice dripping with malice. "You were always too weak to see the truth. This kingdom needed a stronger hand, and I was the one to provide it." Sir Eric, Lady Faith, and Bruce drew their weapons, knowing that this confrontation would decide the fate of Blackwater. But before they could strike, Alistair raised his hand, and the ground beneath them split open, revealing a gaping mole of darkness. The betrayer's laughter echoed as the trio were pulled into the abyss, their screams swallowed by the void. The trio plunged into the darkness, the sensation of falling unending. The void seemed to stretch on forever, an endless chasm of despair and hopelessness. They landed hard on a cold, rocky surface, the impact jarring them from their stupor. Around them, the landscape of hell, a barren wasteland filled with jagged rocks and rivers of molten lava that cast an eerie, blood-red glow over everything. This is hell," Bruce stammered, his voice trembling with fear. The young scribe had read of such places in ancient texts, but nothing had prepared him for the reality of it. "Stay strong," Sir Eric commanded, his voice filled with the resolve of a seasoned warrior. "We're not defeated yet. We must fight our way out of this place and return to the Vale." But as they looked around, they realized the enormity of the task. Hordes of nightmarish creatures, demons, twisted souls, and other abominations began to emerge from the shadows, their eyes glowing with a malevolent hunger. The ground trembled beneath the weight of their approach, and the air was filled with the stench of sulphur and decay. With a roar, the first wave of monsters charged at them, their claws and teeth gleaming in the dim light. Sir Eric raised his sword, the king's crown glowing faintly in his other hand, and they met the charge head-on. Lady Faith summoned her healing magic, using it to bolster their defences and keep the creatures at bay. Bruce, though inexperienced in battle, fought bravely with his short sword, determination fueling his every strike. The battle was relentless, the trio forced to push themselves to the very limits. Every time they felled one monster, two more took its place. The landscape seemed to shift and twist around them, as if hell itself was conspiring to keep them trapped within its infernal grasp. "There's no end to them!" Bruce shouted, desperation creeping into his voice as he narrowly avoided a demon's swipe. "We can't give up!" Sir Eric yelled back, slashing through another creature. "We must find a way out! There has to be a way out!" But as the battle wore on, exhaustion began to take its toll. Their movements grew slower, their strikes less precise. The creatures sensed their weakening resolve and pressed their advantage, surrounding them on all sides. Just as it seemed that all hope was lost, a sudden blinding light erupted from the king's crown in Sir Eric's hand. The light cut through the darkness like a blade, sending the creatures reeling back with agonized screeches. The light intensified, forming a barrier around the trio, protecting them from the onslaught. The ground beneath them began to shake violently, and cracks appeared in the earth, widening rapidly until they formed a chasm that separated the trio from the demonic horde. The chasm widened further, revealing a staircase carved into the rock that descended even deeper into the bowels of hell. "This must be the way out," Lady Faith gasped, her voice filled with a mixture of hope and dread. "But we must hurry, the light won't hold them back for long." With no other option, they descended the staircase, the light from the king's crown guiding their way. The further they went, the hotter the air became, until it was almost unbearable. Finally, they reached the bottom, where they found a massive iron door, engraved with ancient runes that pulsed with a dark energy. "This is it," Sir Eric said, his voice heavy with the weight of their ordeal. "Beyond this door lies the final battle. We either fight our way out, or we perish here." With a deep breath, he pushed the door open, revealing a vast chamber filled with an army of demonic creatures, all led by the towering figure of Sir Alistair. The betrayer's form had become monstrous, his body twisted and corrupted by the dark forces that he had embraced. "Welcome to your doom," Alistair sneered, his voice echoing through the chamber. "You should have stayed dead. Now you will join the rest of the damned." The trio prepared themselves for the fight of their lives, knowing that this battle would determine not just their fate, but the fate of Blackwater itself. With the king's crown shining brightly in Sir Eric's hand, they charged into the fray, determined to bring an end to the curse that had plagued their kingdom for far too long. As the clash of steel against steel filled the chamber, the outcome of battle hung on the balance, the fate of Blackwater teetering on the edge of obliviation. The chamber echoed with the sound of clashing steel and the roars of demonic creatures. Sir Eric, Lady Faith and Bruce fought with every ounce of strength they had left, knowing that failure was not an option. The light from the king's crown shone brightly in the dimness, its golden rays cutting through the thick shadows that clung to the walls like cobwebs. Sir Alistair, now a monstrous figure of corruption and malice, towering over the battlefield. His eyes, once human, now glowing with a fury infernal light. With a twisted smile, he raised his sword, now a massive blade, and brought it down with the force of a falling star. Sir Eric barely managed to block the blow, the impact sending shockwaves through the chamber. "You cannot defeat me, Eric!" Alistair bellowed, his voice reverberating through the chamber. "I have embraced the darkness, and it has made me invincible." Eric gritted his teeth, feeling the weight of the encounter pressing down on him. Alistair's power was immense, fueled by the dark forces of hell. But Eric refused to give in to despair. With a surge of resolve, he pushed back against the monstrous blade, forcing Alistair to retreat a step. "Blackwater will not fall to your treachery, Alistair!" Eric shouted, his voice filled with defiance. "We will end this curse and restore the kingdom." As the two clashed again, Lady Faith focused her magic on keeping the dark forces at bay, her hands glowing with a soft, white light that countered the malevolent energy around them. Her strength was waning, but she knew she had to hold on, for if the light faltered, they would be overwhelmed. Meanwhile, Bruce found himself face to face with a smaller, yet no less dangerous demon. The young scribe had never been trained as a warrior, But his journey had taught him the value of courage and quick thinking. With swift movements, he dodged the creature's claws and struck at its exposed flank, driving his short sword deep into its side. The demon shrieked in pain before dissolving into a cloud of ash. As the battle raged, the king's crown pulsed with an intense light, reacting to the emotions of those who fought to save the kingdom. The crown, a symbol of King Thorne's reign, began to resonate with the spirit of the dead king who still lingered in the vale. It was as if the crown itself was calling out to its true master, urging him to rise and take back what was rightfully his. With a final desperate push, Sir Eric managed to drive Alistair back towards the centre of the chamber. The two warriors locked in a deadly dance, their swords clashing with such force that sparks flew in all directions. Alistair's face twisted with rage as he realised that Eric was not so easy to defeat as he had anticipated. "You think you can win, Eric?" Alistair spat, his voice dripping with venom. "You are nothing without your king, and he is long dead." "Then let his spirit be the one to finish you," Eric replied, his voice steady. With a swift motion, he drove his sword into the ground, sending a shockwave through the chamber that knocked Alistair off balance. As Alistair struggled to regain his footing, Sir Eric raised the crown high above his head. The light from the crown intensified, filling the chamber with a radiant glow. The shadows recoiled, and the demonic creatures howled in pain as the light burnt them away. From within the crown, a ghostly figure began to emerge. It was King Thorne, his spirit now fully restored, his form regal and imposing. The wraith-like appearance was gone, replaced by the image of a wise and just ruler he had once been. "Alistair!" King Thorne's voice echoed through the chamber, filled with the authority and power of a true king. "You have betrayed your kingdom and your king. For your crimes, there will be no redemption." Alistair's face contorted with fear and fury as he realised what was happening. "No, this cannot be!" he screamed, but his protests were drowned out by the roar of the king's spirit. King Thorne raised his spectral hand, and a beam of pure light shot forth from the crown, striking Alistair in the chest. The betrayer screamed in agony as the light consumed him, burning away the darkness that had corrupted him. With a final, ear-piercing shriek, Alistair's monstrous form disintegrated into nothingness, leaving only a faint wisp of smoke behind. The chamber fell silent as the last of the demons fled, their connection to Alistair severed. The light from the king's crown slowly faded, and King Thorne's spirit hovered before them, his expression one of sorrow and relief. "Thank you," he said, his voice softening. "You have freed me from the void, and with it the curse of Blackwater is lifted. But my time in this world is over. I must now rest." With those final words, King Thorne's spirit began to dissolve, the light of the crown dimming until it was no more. The chamber was left in darkness, save the faint glow of the molten lava that surrounded them. Sir Eric, Lady Faith, and Bruce stood in silence, their breaths heavy with the weight of what had transpired. The battle was over, and Blackwater was saved, but at great cost. They had lost their king, but in his death, he had given them the chance to rebuild and restore the kingdom to its former glory. The trio slowly made their way out of the infernal chamber, the remnants of their battle lingering in the air like the fading notes of a requiem. As they ascended the long staircase back to the Vale, you could feel the oppressive atmosphere beginning to lift. The dark energies that had plagued the land were dissipating, and a sense of calm began to settle over the kingdom. When they finally emerged into the world of the living, they were met with the first light of dawn. The sun's rays broke through the clouds, casting a warm, golden glow over the landscape. The kingdom of Blackwater, though scarred by the events of the past, was beginning to heal. But their victory had not come without sacrifice. As they returned to Castle Blackwater, Bruce, who had fought so bravely alongside them, suddenly faltered. Sir Eric and Lady Faith rushed to his side, but it was clear that the young scribe was gravely wounded. The dark energies of the Vale had clearly taken their toll on him, and despite Lady Faith's healing magic, Bruce's life force was slipping away. "I'm sorry," Bruce whispered, his voice weak. "I wish I could have seen the kingdom restored." "Do not apologize, Bruce," Sir Eric said, his voice choked with emotion. "You have done more for the kingdom than anyone could have asked. You have proven yourself a true hero." Lady Faith kneeled beside him, tears streaming down her face as she tried to ease his pain. But Bruce, with a faint smile, shook his head. "Thank you," he softly said, "for everything." With those final words, Bruce closed his eyes, his breath slowing until it stopped altogether. Lady Faith bowed her head, her heart heavy with grief, while Sir Eric placed his hand on Bruce's shoulder, a silent gesture of respect for the young man who had given his life to save the kingdom. They laid Bruce to rest in the royal cemetery, in a place of honour alongside the fallen heroes of Blackwater. The king's crown, now devoid of its former power, was placed on the pedestal in the castle's great hall, a symbol of the kingdom's resilience and the sacrifices made to protect it. Sir Eric and Lady Faith, though deeply saddened by the loss of their comrade, knew that they had a duty to fulfill. With the curse lifted and the kingdom free from the dark forces that had plagued it, they set to work rebuilding Blackwater, restoring the fields and bringing hope back to the people. In time, the kingdom began to flourish once more. The crops grew bountiful, the forests became safe, and the people of Blackwater found peace. Sir Eric and Lady Faith, now leaders of their own realm, ensured that Bruce's name would never be forgotten. His story was told in songs and tales, a reminder of the bravery and selflessness that had saved the kingdom. And so, under the guidance of those who had fought to protect it, Blackwater thrived once again, testament to the strength of the people and the memory of those who had given everything to see it restored. Years passed and the kingdom of Blackwater stood as a beacon of hope and resilience. Sir Eric and Lady Faith ruled wisely, ensuring that the lessons of the past were never forgotten. The castle, once the site of such darkness, became a symbol of the kingdom's rebirth. But amid the peace and prosperity, they never forgot the price that had been paid: the memory of Bruce, the young scribe who had fought so bravely. He was honoured each year with a day of remembrance. People from all corners of the kingdom would gather at the castle, laying flowers at his grave and recounting the tales of his bravery. One evening, as the sun set over the kingdom, casting a warm glow over the fields and forests, Sir Eric stood on the battlements of Castle Blackwater. The air was filled with the sounds of life, the laughter of children, the songs of birds, the rustling of the leaves in the gentle breeze. He felt a presence beside him and turned to see Lady Faith, her expression serene as they gazed out over the land they had fought so hard to protect. "We've come a long way," she said softly, her voice filled with both pride and a hint of sadness. "Indeed we have," Eric replied, his eyes scanning the horizon. "But there are still challenges ahead. The darkness will always be there, lurking in the shadows. But we are stronger now, and we know what it takes to overcome it." Lady Faith nodded, a smile touching her lips. "And we have each other," she added. "As long as we stand together, I believe we can face whatever comes." Sir Eric reached out and took her hand, a gesture of unity and strength. Together, they stood in silence, watching as the sun dipped below the horizon, signalling the end of one day and the promise of a new dawn. As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Sir Eric felt a sense of peace wash over him. The kingdom was safe, the people were happy, and the memory of those who had fought and died for Blackwater would never be forgotten.